What I believe is common sense, I'm learning it's not that common. Today, most people know Joy Eakins as the business owner behind Cornerstone Data, the successful and fast-growing consulting firm based here in Wichita. Her business acumen even landed her as the Wichita Chamber Chair for a year in 2023, where she both challenged and encouraged our business community. That's the Joy most people see, the business leader. But I've come to know Joy on a different level, the principled fighter. And her story of where she's come from and where she hopes to go is worth sharing. We talk about the challenges she's had to overcome, her time on the Wichita School Board, and I ask her the question that a lot of people are asking right now: is Joy going to run for governor? And what does she think this state needs in the next governor? I hope you enjoy my conversation with my friend, Joy Eakins. Joy Eakins, welcome. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, before we get started, and we're going to talk about a lot today, and I'm going to ask you some questions about what's in your future, because there's a lot of discussion about, wow, Joy Eakins has got some big plans, and these things could come to fruition. And but before we get into that, because I want to talk a lot about that, because I really want to pick your brain. I want the public to know the Joy that I know. But one of the things that I remember most about our relationship, which began in a business environment with a cohort, with a roundtable of other business leaders and local entrepreneurs. And when I told you that I was considering running for office, you said something to me, and I'm sure you probably don't remember this conversation, but I remember it clearly. And I said, I'm just not sure what I want to do. I don't know if I want to leave my business to do this, and on and on and on. And you said one phrase. You said, make faithful investments. And you told me that, and it changed my entire perspective of what it is that I wanted to do and why I wanted to do it. So thank you, because you gave me a perspective about why I wanted to run for office that was a little bit of fuel to kind of help me in the decision, but also help me in that process, and it helps me to this day. So thank you, my friend.
Oh, well, I'm glad that helped. I've said that phrase to a lot of people, and you never know if it takes or helps, but I think that's been the theme of my life, is making faithful investments in other people, in the community, in my business, and my family, and over a lifetime, you start to be able to see the results of that. But sometimes you get to a moment where you have to make a decision. Is this the right faithful investment, or is it something else? And that's kind of where you were. So
absolutely.
It's hard for a business person to leave their business and walk into politics, because it's unknown and it's something new for them. And I see it over and over again. There's always this kind of crisis of confidence about, what I think, does that actually work in politics? And it does. And you've done an incredible job.
Oh, thank you.
The county commission, and we're all very thankful for your leadership.
Well, I'll tell you what was so hard, and I think you can relate to this as an entrepreneur. When you build a business, and in the process of building a business, you have the wins, you have the losses, you have the victories, but you have the defeats. I mean, it is an emotional roller coaster, the life of an entrepreneur. And then to say, you know what, I'm going to kind of take a time out, and I'm going to entrust other people to lead this while I do this. I'll tell you, and I haven't said a whole lot of this publicly, that was a tumultuous season for me personally, 20 years. And with Mattress Hub in particular, this was a business that we had built very quickly. We had scaled it to 27 stores across 3 states in just a matter of 5 years. And we almost lost this thing and had to rebuild it and resurrect it back up. It was hard to be able to say, okay, I'm going to pause and serve in this capacity for a little while. And you encouraged me in a lot of those ways. So
glad I could do that. And it's a grieving process in a sense, to step away from something that you birthed in a sense, and you walked through. But at the same time, I was going through a transition into chamber chair and looking at how my business needed to be different, and going from working in the day-to-day, all the technical work, to giving that off to other people. So it was a great time for us to be walking through that together and helping each other.
Together. Your story is one of the most compelling stories that I know of as a friend, but also just as someone in this community. Take me back, and let's briefly, how did you get to Wichita? You're not from here originally. How did your family get to Wichita? And now as, this booming entrepreneur, small business tycoon with Cornerstone Data. But how did you get here?
Yeah, everybody knows the Joy today, but most people don't know my backstory. Right. I grew up in Mississippi, Texas, Mississippi. We moved around a lot. Difficult circumstances in my home. and middle class, and then sinking down below middle class. And in Mississippi, the education system was not at the time good at all. So it's just a lot of difficult situations and some trauma there that had to go through. And I just was one of those children that said, I need to get out of this. And of course, President Reagan was in office, and he was talking to people about the American dream, and Americans can do things if they want to. And so I was an avid reader. I just started studying and reading and studying, and people around me said you could maybe go to college. And so I just worked really hard to get a full scholarship to be able to go to college and get out of that system. And then went to graduate school where I met a Wichitan, Joy Eakins, and in Colorado, he was there. Thankfully, he was there for a short time, and I fell in love with this Kansan. And I didn't know it was because he was a Kansan that I was falling in love with him. I just thought, wow, what a neat guy. He's driving the elderly to church on Sunday, and he's driving Chinese nationals to English classes. And he's, a 26-year-old guy who does that. And then I got to know his family, and amazing family who had started a business here that my husband now runs. And just started falling in love with the people of Kansas. And then as we would come back, even just for our bridal shower that they threw here, there were 30 hostesses. And I thought, where does that happen? I mean, I'm from the hospitality state, but that doesn't happen. And over the time that we lived in Colorado, we would come here. We just always saw new Kansans, met new people. And so in 2008, our families were having some health issues. Eric's business was our son was getting ready to start kindergarten. And we'd always said, when Aaron starts kindergarten, we really don't want to move anymore after that. I moved around a lot. I didn't want him to have to deal with all of that. And so we just had this opportunity open up to move back to Wichita. And I was the first one in the family to say, let's go, let's go and let's do this. And I thought we were doing it for Eric's career, but it turned out to be the best decision I've ever made, other than following Jesus and getting married. So it was just a great decision for us, and really opened the doors and gave us a lot of opportunity.
What is it about this place? I mean, I think outsiders understand it more than those that were raised here, the natives here. I'll give you two examples. One, when I talked to Mayor Wu, when she came on this podcast, and she said this publicly, she said it privately. This is an immigrant who has just fallen in love with this city for all the reasons that sometimes I think we overlook. I remember playing baseball and living on the East Coast particularly, and people would learn I'm from Kansas. And they would always talk about, Kansas nice. Like everyone we meet from Kansas is just so polite, so nice. Now you are an import into this city, into Wichita. What is it about this place that has grabbed your soul?
People like to say nice, but that's not the real word, I think, that describes our people. I think they're investors in other people. And I kind of talked about this when I was chamber chair, but this week I had I was in an event, and I talked to two different people in that event that if I said their names, everybody would know them, but they are incredible people toward the end of their careers. They're moving to other things. And both of them that day had spent time with some entrepreneur or some young person that had just moved to the community. They had lunch with them, or they had a meeting with them, and then they were working to figure out how they could connect them to 5 or 10 other people. That's just unheard of anywhere else. And so, and it's not, that's a regular story you hear all the time. It's not something you hear once in a while. And Mayor Wu has a similar story about people that invested in her.
Right.
So, and you do too. And so it's just this thing that runs through us, that this is what we do. We meet people, we see them, and then we try and help them become part of our community. And we moved into our house in College Hill, and I think in the first week, we had 13 gifts show up at our door.
Wild.
And they were all practical, useful things, like a bucket full of cold drinks, with things that our son would love. And I just thought, well, that's really interesting. And then my next thought was, when the next person moved in, well, now I have to do
you got to pay it forward,
right? Because this is who we are as a community.
It's the stewardship it's this burden of responsibility we have to build this place. Right. I talked to a few people yesterday, and they talked about having a generational mindset. I spoke yesterday at the Central County Fire graduation ceremony. We had 7 new recruits coming in, and one of the points I talked about was having a generational mindset, what it means to build generationally in this place. And generational building means investment into the future generation, into the next generation. And I think many people here feel a responsibility. That's not about just being kind. It's not about being compassionate. Many people that we run around with feel like they have a responsibility to give back. Right. Do you see the same?
Yeah, I think they do have a responsibility. If we want Kansas to be who we know Kansas can be and to meet all of our full potential, we have to do those things.
That's it.
And if you think back about all the people in leadership now and the people that invested in them, where would we be if they hadn't been doing that investing?
Right.
So if we don't do it, where would we be in 20, 30 years? It won't be a good place.
That's right.
So we have to do it. And the next generation is so vitally important for doing that.
It is. Let's talk about the next generation. The greatest impact we have on the next generation is our kids. I have 4. Right now, they're 13, 11, 8, and 1. My house is like an amusement park. It's wildly energetic and wildly beautiful. It's an incredible place. But tell me about Aaron. I know a little bit about your son.
Yeah.
What's he up to right now? It's something that I know you're incredibly proud of. Tell me.
Yeah, so Aaron, by the time this airs, Aaron will have graduated from the Air Force Academy.
It's awesome.
Yeah, we're really proud of him. He is going to be a second lieutenant in the Air Force.
Wow.
And he's been selected to go to pilot training in Columbus, Mississippi. So I think there's a little bit of fun in the fact that he's going to be in Mississippi for at least a year. There's kind of a full circle moment for him to see, but I think it'll be good for him to see the difference, and he's already been seeing it, the difference in other places and how people are. But what a great opportunity for him, and I feel like we've been able to successfully raise him. He's launched, he has a career, and he's doing what he has talked about doing since 7th grade, which is flying. So
what the pride knowing that your son went to the Air Force Academy, but he's serving his country. Like, what does that mean to you as a mom?
Man.
And
that was such a surprise because we are not a military family. So when he came to me and his dad in 7th grade and said, well, when I go to college, I want to go to a service academy or into the military.
He knew this a long time ago. This was a trajectory. Wow.
He said this is what he wanted to do. And then when he was entering high school, we had conversations about, do we move him into private school? Do we keep him in public high school? And the Wichita public school system has a great JROTC program, and we thought if he could be involved in that, he'll find out if this is what he really wants. And if he doesn't like it, I would rather him know before he goes. But so, and of course he loved it, and he was like cadet commander his junior year, so he excelled in it. And I think what came out of that was he applied to every service academy and every ROTC branch, and then said, if I don't get a scholarship for that, then I'll just enlist. But he just had this desire to serve his country and to be a pilot. And so we're really, really proud of him and proud of the sacrifice he's made. And we're excited to see what he's going to do next.
It's this theme about investing, faithful investments. It's this theme about giving back. It's this theme with your family and knowing Eric. And I don't know Aaron, but I, like a proud mom, you talk about him frequently. And you tell me about the visits when you go visit him over at the Air Force Academy. And I know you guys are just beaming about where he's at in his life. But this is a theme for your family.
Yeah, Wichita has been so great to us in supporting Aaron. And, every time I post on social media about something that he's doing or a tradition at the Air Force Academy, people congratulate him or like it, and for us, it's a way to help share what the military is like, because sometimes it's a big box that people don't know. Yeah. But the prayers and the encouragement that people have given him and us through the process, because it's difficult, has just been amazing. And so we feel like we've been invested in as much as he's serving. So.
Yeah, well, thank you for his service. Thank you for raising a young man that wants to give back to his country. And you did a good job, Mom. Congrats.
Thanks.
Let's talk about business briefly, because the joy that people in this community know is the entrepreneur, is the person that takes data and makes it real for small businesses and helps them to make strategic decisions. You have a way, Joy, to think about issues and strategy and to take data to tell a story. It's a gifting for you. It's a business gifting for you. Tell me about that entrepreneurship side. Tell me about Cornerstone Data. Tell me what it's like to work in the same building as your husband, who has a different company, but in the same building, and you guys work together in your entrepreneurial journey. And then bridge that into how that became the chamber chair and what all this did for you to shape you into standing in front on stage at chamber events and promoting and advocating and championing the small business community.
Yeah, so Cornerstone Data is going to be 17 years old in October.
Congrats.
It's sort of hard to believe that it's been so successful for so long. It hasn't always been a great story. There have been a lot of really hard days along the way, but we've been blessed with some incredible customers. So, now our footprint is in 27 states, 160 cities.
Wow.
And we do a lot of different kinds of work for our customers, whether it's analyzing their data or helping them build reports. But a lot of the work we do is helping them build a culture that understands how to use data and how to think about it. And so I think about it, it's if accounting was new in your organization and nobody had been trained on it, how would you know how to do it?
Right.
And so, of course, accounting's been around forever. That seems silly, but data is new for people and they don't have a literacy. So there's all kinds of technical things we help clients with in building their frameworks and infrastructures. But then we also have to help those leaders think about, how do I unleash my people to do this, and how do I encourage them to do it, and how do I train them to do it? And so I've got to spend a lot of time over the years in the office, in the C-suite, and with executive leaders talking about their culture and their company and how to help them make the adaptive changes they need. Yeah. And it's been a real privilege to sit in those rooms with them, and I've learned so much about their businesses. So it's been just such a blessing.
Well, and the client list is impressive. And every time I talk to these C-suite leaders and the people that have brought your company in to consult and to help shape, it's a glowing review. They're like, no, we didn't see it. She was able to unleash a perspective with the use of data to teach us about our company and to help us shape strategic futures.
Right.
I mean, in the entrepreneur world, in the small business world, in the big business world, data tells a story, and you leverage data for companies to help them shape their perspective and the health of their company.
Yeah, and I think we take a slightly different approach than some. Some people will talk about data-driven decisions. We think that's terrible. Yeah. You're the leader. You should know where you want to go, right? The data should inform you about whether you can get there and how fast and what tweaks you might need to make on the way. And that's very different than a lot of the marketing that's out there from companies that say, oh, buy this one data tool and it'll solve all your data needs. Never does. Never happens.
Yeah.
Be very skeptical when you hear that. And so by the time people find us, or when people find us and they start talking to us and they realize we're not saying like that your people's gut isn't important or that your leadership instincts are important. We're saying use the data to help you get where you're trying to go.
To influence your decision making. Yeah. The awareness piece of this.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's very needed in business and in the entrepreneurial world. I'm going to say that in the government space, it's incredibly needed too, and there's a big disconnect there. I mean, tell me, am I right? Am I wrong? Now, I have experience in business now and also in local government, and let me just say, one of the surprising things for me when I got into local government in Sedgwick County, I can't speak for any other small government or any other local government, but for Sedgwick County, I was really impressed. There are some really brilliant people walking around from the manager's office to finance. I mean, they're brilliant. And they do make data-informed decisions, and they help data to help guide us. I don't know if that's the case in all local governments and even at the state level. Am I right? Am I wrong?
Yeah, our experience has been that's not the case in many of the organizations we've worked with, particularly in Kansas. And some of that is because the systems aren't automated. And so there's a lot of spreadsheets sitting around. And so for a particular question that someone will have, they can go pull that data and put it together for them. But as a day-to-day setup of these are the KPIs and this is why they matter, and these are the benchmarks that tell us if we're going to hit those KPIs, so we can know in your year starts in July, so we can know in August, not May, that we're going to hit them.
So you mean it actually makes sense to measure decision making and analyze return on investment and let that help influence decisions?
Yeah.
Oh, what a novel concept.
I think in the case of local governments, those are sometimes much longer. It takes longer before you see the benefit of some of the decisions you make. So again, you can't measure too soon, but there should be things you should see that tell you, should I tweak this or change that, and then help you keep moving along.
I get asked a lot how my business experience has shaped my perspective in local government. And I'll tell you, business and government have two different aims.
Right.
One is profitability, shareholder value. The other is many times service provider, stewardship of resources. There's different aims. However, the principles are the same. Is I can use business principles to help manage and to, as an elected, to make decisions about resources and how we do services here. There's principles in business that are applicable to how we do small government and local government. So, and you've helped me understand these things in regards to how data informs these. And the community has acknowledged it. The small business community says, wow, Cornerstone Data, Joy Eakins, like they're leading in this regard. And they made you the chamber chair, the Wichita area chamber chair in 2023. Tell me about that experience and what it is you did and what your theme was as you challenged and to help advocate for the small business community.
Yeah, so that's been such a great privilege to be able to do that. So I was on the chamber board for almost a decade, and I just started before the chamber board. I just started out on a small business committee, and I opened my mouth with a lot of opinions. And anybody that knows me know I have a lot of thoughts, but my questions were along the lines of, we have a large membership of small businesses, like 85%, I think, at the time, but how come our priorities don't match their interests too? And I was just asking a question, because that's what I do for a living,
exactly
is I ask questions and help people think about things. And so I think Scott Schwindeman was the chair of that, and I think he saw me and said, let's put her on the board and see what she can do. And when I got on the board, I think there were 2 or 3 small business members on a board of 60-ish people. And so then, over time, I just started asking the question, well, if we're a small business, how come our leadership doesn't match our membership, and how could we do that? And so, it was during a conversation in a time where we were talking about how do we diversify the voices at the table, because at the Kansas Leadership Center, they talk a lot about having unusual voices so that you can hear everything that's going on. And we think about that with data all the time. What data are we missing? So that, those conversations started, and over time, we just started helping larger businesses in the community understand that half of the employment in the city of Wichita and in Sedgwick County is from small business, and started helping give them a voice, because most of the time they're busy running their small business, so they aren't at the event. So we just started putting a lot of things in place. And then one day, I was invited to a meeting with one of my clients, and I'm going to talk about client stuff, and I don't get asked about client stuff. I get asked, would you be the chamber chair in 2023? Yeah. And that was a moment of, really, me? You want me to do that? And, I took some time I think every person asked like that, take some time to think about it and pray and talk with their family, because I knew that would mean I had to change the relationship in my company, right? Because it's a big job. But I felt, Damon was, I know you interviewed Damon Young. Damon was the year before me, Ben Hutton before him, and I could see how that would line up with something I was really passionate about. And so I said yes, and that led to 4 years on the Chairs Council, which was a great time. There was a lot of things happening at the chamber as we changed leadership to John Rolfe, and as we looked at the future of the chamber and where we wanted to go. It was a good time to have big conversations about what that should look like and how we build that. Yeah. And then at the same time, we've come out of COVID at this point, and we did a ton of work on COVID data inside our business, but we were sensing and hearing from businesses, particularly small businesses, that it sort of felt like somebody had taken a snow globe of their life and just kept shaking it. And as soon as you'd feel like it was going to settle, it would get shaken again. And so people were sort of, I think maybe a little lost about what should we do?
What a metaphor, yeah.
How do we work through this? How do we, what's the new normal? And in the midst of that, discouragement. And so, I thought this is a time to call people back to the thing that we're really good at.
That's good.
Faithfully investing in other people. And so that was the whole year's discussion, the chair's lunch where I spoke. I actually brought people in who'd been invested in to say, this is what we would look like if we weren't investing. And then I reminded people that there'd been unprecedented times before, in the 1920s when the chamber was formed. There'd been a world war, there'd been a pandemic, there'd been a depression, and instead of backing off, people doubled down and they formed the United Way, and they, did all of this work. And I said, look, this is the time we step up and do the work, not later. So don't quit. this thing that you do, Kansans.
Gosh.
Keep doing it.
Well, and it's a theme that I've seen in your life that you say yes. You say yes in formative seasons, in formative times. And I think people that know you, they know the public sees joy, which is a perfect metaphor for who you are. You bring joy to a room. You bring energy to the room. It's just who you are. But the people, when we get at the table and we see you in these settings, particularly in these meetings, you're a fighter.
Yeah.
And I've seen this firsthand. There's principles, there's convictions. You ask questions in a way that I've never been around another business leader that asks the questions you ask. And you fight for the things you care about. You've said yes in formative seasons before. The chamber chair wasn't the first time you said yes. Moving to Kansas was just one example of you saying yes. You said yes to running and winning a school board seat for USD 259. Where did that come from? Why did you decide this is where I need to take a stand? I need to fight for these convictions and fight for these principles. Where did that come from? Why did you run?
So my husband and I have a bonus son named Marquise. And anybody who's followed us on Facebook has seen pictures of Marquise. He's 27 years old. He works for American Airlines. He's a airline attendant. He's an amazing young man. We first met Marquise when he was in 7th grade through an organization called Youth Horizons that matches Christians with mentors. And, they matched Eric with Marquise, but in our family, that becomes a family match. So everyone's in. And at the time, my business was smaller, and I was tutoring a lot of kids just as my service to the community. Aaron was in elementary school, and so I was tutoring 35, 40 kids a week. And
wait, time out.
Yeah.
You were tutoring 35 to 40 kids a week?
Yeah, in math. Yeah, because I love math, and you want these kids to get an idea about math and
Joy,
how good it
we
is.
tutored and we mentored, but 35 to 40 kids a week?
Yeah, it was great. I loved it.
Wow.
And so when Marquise came along and he had some issues with his grades, he said, well, I would like to have a better math score. So Eric said, well, you can come home after school with Aaron. Joy will help tutor you and we'll get you up to speed. So in my first tutoring session with Marquise, it was on the Pythagorean theorem. Yeah. And I thought, Marquise understands this, but sometimes he's saying things that don't make sense. Like I can't hear the teacher when she said this. And I'm thinking, but he's smart. So why can't he? So I'm thinking, does he have a hearing issue? So he invites me, the teacher invites me to the class to help Marquise during class period. So I show up for the first half of the class before they go to lunch, and it instantly became clear to me why Marquise couldn't hear. It wasn't his hearing. The classroom was in chaos, and there was a teacher standing at the front of the room who was just reading from the script and talking, and children all over the room were just talking over the top of each other, throwing paper. I mean, it was something you'd expect to see in an inner city school in Chicago or New York. It was not Wichita Public Schools. It is not the community we live in. That is not okay. And I was taken aback watching this, and I was able to visit this classroom several times. It wasn't just a bad day. That was the norm. I sort of staggered out of the building to my car because I was so emotionally convicted about it. And as I left the room and closed the door behind me, I thought, I'm going to get Marquise out of this classroom. And then I turned to head down the hall, and I thought, what happens to the other 24 kids? And that just stayed with me as I fought for Marquise to get him out of school. And I saw, I had a counselor tell me that some kids are just doomed to fail, talking about that classroom. And that just made me sick. I mean, how can you say that? And why do you think that's okay to even consider that kids are doomed to fail when they're 14, 15 years old?
Awful.
It's a horrible thing. I would never say that to a child, or their parents. And so maybe a year and a half later, Eric came home and said, hey, Connie Dietz is giving up her seat on the school board, and I think you should run. And I said,
yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Not on my radar. Although I did used to watch school board meetings on TV all the time, so maybe it was a foretelling. So, but as I prayed about it and thought about it, those 24 kids just kept coming back.
Wow.
They're doomed to fail. And I thought, maybe I could get on the school board. No, I would get on the school board, and I would be a voice for those kids and for their parents. And so I we mounted a campaign. We mounted a campaign against the sitting school board at the night of the election. At the watch party, it was me and my family because all of our friends were at a wedding. And at his watch party was the president of the board, Lynn Rogers, and this president of the teachers union, and all the other board members. And we won by 46 votes. And wow. I thought that night we just beat a machine that we didn't even understand, because I think, we're so new to politics.
You're an outsider. There was an establishment or perceived establishment. And
there is an establishment.
What was the message that won? Like, you won by 46 votes, but you took a message, you knocked doors. What was it? What resonated with people?
Yeah, the message we had was we should be building bridges between organizations in the city, between parents and the school district, between other leaders, between business and the school district, and having open conversations about all these things, not deciding them behind the scenes. And so, and they were in the middle of a bond issue. They were in the middle of talking about moving southeast to another part of the city, which was super controversial. And they were having very organized conversations that were meant to limit discussion. It was very clear. And so I think that people were just open to, maybe we should be having better conversations, and parents should have a better voice and not feel like the decision's already made and this is just for show. And that's what won. And I've thought often about every little meeting we went to, every little group we went and spoke to. If we'd missed one, maybe I wouldn't have won, but we won. And
you did. What was your experience like? Did you enjoy it?
It was terrible. I mean, you think you're getting on a school board to help kids, and you are, but the people on that school board immediately decided I was a threat. And so they started rumors about me. Because I was a Christian, apparently that's some kind of problem for them. And then just every time I asked a question or pulled something off the agenda to ask a question, I would get an email the next day, or I would have somebody pull me aside at the end of the meeting and get on to me about it. I was told I was dangerous because I wanted to visit every school in the district during my term, because apparently visiting schools as a school board member is dangerous. No, it's us understanding what's going on in the school, so when teachers come talk to us, we know their school. It's about being present with the people who are serving our kids. But that was dangerous. Having one no vote on X, Y, or Z is bad for the community. And it was just ongoing. And, even the paper picked this up. I mean, they would write, well, she's often the lone no vote. Do you know how many times I voted no in 4.5 years? You want to guess? 14. Do you know how many times I voted yes? Thousands.
But they took the 14 no votes where you stood on your own and voted your conscience, and they extrapolated that as to be a theme, as if you're the lone wolf.
Less than 1%.
Radical.
Well, it probably did seem big because among all the other board members in that same period of time, there were only 7 no votes. Yeah. So, I just always thought that's so crazy. Why would you think that 14 a no vote says, I've considered this, and I value children too. I think there's a different way to get where you're trying to go.
Which is totally on brand for you.
So, when we talked about, and I think maybe the worst of it was toward the end of my term when we were looking at trying to balance the budget. And there were board members showing up in 3x3 saying things like, well, we need to make cuts so parents feel it, so they'll vote differently next time.
Oh my.
And you're thinking, why are we trying to hurt children? I thought we valued children. I thought we valued their education. I thought we valued the next generation. So when it came time to vote on, for example, longer days, shorter school year, which is a terrible idea because you've got kindergartners now on buses until 5:30 at night. You're changing the entire traffic pattern of the city. There's 1,000 things you're doing there that are hurtful to children and families and everyone else. Or you could look at a contract for SEIU. We wouldn't even consider that. We wouldn't even have the discussion. So that no vote is completely dangerous.
Sure.
Well, I'm happy to be dangerous.
Yeah.
Let's be dangerous.
Well, you fight. You're not. You are willing to fight for the principles and the things, and you do it in a way to where it's not just a no. It's let's consider all options. There could be another way. You try to advance discussion and conversation. This, you being isolated the way you felt like you were, Did that embolden you? Did you cower there? How did you internalize that, and what was the effect of that?
I think at first it was hard, especially in the first year. There was something that happened at my son's school that put him in a very difficult position inside a classroom of a teacher that was being moved. And I felt like they put him in harm's way, and that made me angry. And then as I tried to advocate for having conversations about that, then everyone got upset on the board that I would dare to ask to have a conversation about it in executive session, because that's where you talk about personnel issues. And so then so we went through this process in the meeting, and then Lynn Rogers stands up later and calls me a liar. Like, I'm not a liar. What are you talking about? Because I didn't tell him. Well, I told 3 other people what I was going to do, or 2 other people, and then I don't want to break coma.
Yeah.
But, you should just talk to people anyway. No, there's a law there that says we can't.
Sure.
We should be talking at the board table.
Well, you wrote, and I found this, Joy, I didn't know this existed.
Yeah.
In October of 2017, you wrote an op-ed to the Wichita Eagle.
I did, yeah.
It said, and the title of the op-ed was Joy Eakins, Transparency, Indeed, an Issue on the Wichita School Board. You were calling this out publicly, that you felt like, that there were backdoor deals, backdoor conversations, lack of transparency. What was it?
So they were having conversations in the background and making decisions before it came to the public, and there would be no conversation in the public eye about these issues. So, and you know that when you bring a complex issue before the Board of Education, and there is not one question, not one discussion, and it's just a vote, and the vote is 6-1, they've already talked about and made their decision about what they're going to do. And in essence, Lynn Rogers tried to accuse me of being upset there because I didn't get my way 14 times when I voted no. Please, I'm an adult. That's not how I operate. But in that editorial, he conceded that probably there's too many backroom conversations. Yeah, exactly what I was saying was true. There's too many backroom conversations, and they weren't having them in public, talking about the issues that matter to people, and that's what the public was upset about. And so when it came up during the race that year, and I was at one of those times when the candidates were all speaking about what they cared about,
forum, yeah.
And they were being told, oh, no, there's no transparency issue. I'm like, I got really mad that night. I was like, no, there is a transparency issue, and you've all been doing these things. And so I just sat down that night. I think it was about 2 a.m. I woke up. I was just still mad, and I just started writing it, and then, edited a couple times. And then I just sent it over to the Eagle and said, would you be interested in this? And, there was, in addition to the admission of guilt, basically, in that article by Lynn Rogers, but, something that they never talked about was parents were literally told on a committee that they were not allowed to speak about recess, because they came to the board and they spoke about recess because kindergartners were getting 1 recess before lunch every day. That was it. And their schedule was filled from 9 a.m. to 11:30. They're 5.
Yeah.
They're 5. And we now know that everything that was being put in place, we have scientific evidence that says everything was the wrong thing for kids to be learning how to read. Kindergartners learn by play. Kindergarten teachers were telling us, why have you taken all the play out? And so, and if you go, there are schools here and great schools in like Mays where that they do a ton of play in their kindergarten.
A lot of interactive learning.
Right. That's the way small children learn. And so these parents came and they speak to the board, and then the board president at the time, Betty Arnold, says, "Oh no, those parents can't speak in that committee anymore." And I went to a board meeting. I'd sent the email to the chair of that committee and the parents and said, like, this is what I've been instructed to tell you. I disagree with it, but I'm going to follow through.
Advocating for families, advocating for kids.
And so at that meeting, when the teachers in the room heard that these parents had been shut down, they just said, we're not having a meeting. And they all got up and left because they knew it was wrong. These parents spoke, they used their First Amendment right to speak to the school board of elected people that are supposed to support them, and then they get shut down. And the entire board knew that story. I told them all in an executive session what had happened, and I asked them to change it, and none of them stood up for it. And then they all tried to pretend later like they knew nothing. Oh, I don't remember that. Yes,
wow.
You do.
I didn't know this story.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Joy, we got to fight for parents. We got to fight for kids. We got to fight for teachers and good teachers. How do we do that? Your school board experience is so unique. It's so complex. It emboldened you. It sharpened you in many ways. It developed you even to be even more of a fighter. How do we contend for teachers who many times feel like maybe their voices are not in?
Our teachers are so incredible. I still have teachers. I had one last week that texted me something because she's concerned about it, and she was worried, and she didn't know if she should say something because she might lose her job if she speaks up. You know, our teachers do incredible work every day, and it's really important to separate them from the union because, frankly, most of them aren't in the union. So the union exists because the state of Kansas says every district must bargain with a unit. So teachers can't just go do their own contract. You have to have a union. So here's the union that they work with. But that union does not always represent teachers. And I think when I got elected, and when you look at some of the different surveys that have been done over time, you see the proof of that teachers think the district's heading in the wrong direction. And then you have districts that value the teachers, and you see that. But you know, I always said we've had all this growth across the state, not just Wichita, but across the state in administrators, just the number of administrators in districts and the administrative pay and how that's increased. And teachers have gotten very little of that money. And my question was always, how come a teacher has to leave the classroom to make six figures? Because that's what administrators make. But these teachers, we have some incredible master teachers who don't want to leave the classroom because their calling is to teach. So how come we can't find a way to pay them what they're worth and have them influence other teachers who need help and need to get there? We could be so innovative and think about that, but we skip right over it. And so we leave So if you want to make $90,000 a year, $100,000 a year, you have to go get your administrator's license.
Administrator, or leave education altogether.
Or leave education.
And it shouldn't be like that, should it?
Shouldn't be like that at all. Because who wins in that scenario? It's not the kids. The kids are not winning in that scenario.
That's the question. Yeah.
Right? And so, I just think we should really rethink some of those policies and procedures and have conversations.
What you just described, and that spirit of fighting and advocating for kids, families and parents and teachers, and the fight and the willingness to be isolated, to stand on conviction, is why people are saying, Joy, we need you to be the chamber chair. Boy, Joy, we want to work with your company. We want to find a way to work with your company. And then here in the last few months, this resounding call is, Joy, we want you to enter politics again. Yeah. There are numerous people in this community that are calling you, emailing you, messaging you, and saying, Joy, run for governor. So I'm not sure where you're at on this discussion yet, but I'm going to ask, because you ask hard questions, and I'm going to ask you hard questions.
Well, thank you.
People are asking you to run for governor, and you're toying with this idea. Like, how serious is this, and where's your head at on this?
I'm pretty serious about this. This started over 18 months ago. I had some people come to me and talk to me about running for office again, entering politics. And I wasn't sure if it was the right time. I was just coming out of chamber chair. But I thought I would start thinking about it. And then more people came and started talking about the governor's role. And so that, for Eric and I, we started thinking about, well, if we were going to do that, what does that look like? And as a family, you think the school board is hard? Man,
oh boy.
The state's way harder and uglier, but the problems are bigger.
Bingo.
And they impact us. And when I step back and I look at, like we've just talked about how incredible all of these people in Kansas are, but over 15 years, we've lost population. We're losing all these. That's our best asset in the state.
Our people.
And they're leaving because they need opportunity. And for me, I start asking questions. Well, why is that happening? Could we fix that? Could we change that? Could we keep those people here? Could we actually have a comeback for Kansas? And that started me down the road, just like, thinking about those kids that had no voice. It started me thinking about, how do I give a voice to those Kansans who don't have one at the table? Because, look, here's what's happening. Our individual tax burden in Kansas is only 1% lower than California. We're a red state for the most part. How do we have policies like that?
And what's
in our
the return
state?
on that investment?
Right. What's the return on that investment? It's not good. And we're heading that. It's getting worse. I mean, we've increased spending in the state by over 40% since 2019. And that's with a supermajority in the legislature. So why are we spending that many billions of dollars a year when our population is shrinking to the point that we're going to lose another congressional seat? It doesn't make sense. And then you look at, I'm always out looking at data and thinking about things. So I'm on the census site and I see this graphic that says Kansas has, they're lining up per capita local state employees employed by the government. Kansas is number 2 on the list of the worst.
Wow.
Right behind Wyoming. I'm like,
know that.
What? That's why we have to have such high taxes. That's why we have to have, because we have to take care of this state that we've put together. Of workers. And look, I'm not saying all government workers are bad, but I am saying there has to be a balance. We can't be 49th of
the ratios seem to be off.
We're off.
Well, that's it. And that's why people are saying we're in this mode, we're in this spirit in this country, both sides, where they're looking for fighters. They are looking for people that are willing to put up a fight and fight for principles and fight for people. What are the issues? Like if I was to say, Joy, you kind of hinted at it a little bit, but what are the issues that say, you know what, I am strongly considering this because I think that we need a change. I think that Kansas has to have a different trajectory. I think we need a pivot of sorts. What are those issues that say, this isn't working for Kansas, we need new leadership? What is it?
Yeah, well, I mean, we did just talk about one of them, which is what's our tax and regulatory burden for businesses. So that all of those kinds of things hurt entrepreneurs trying to start new businesses. It hurts businesses here trying to stay here. And, we spend a lot of time and a lot of money in the state going out and looking for other businesses and asking them to come here. And I talk to business leaders here all the time who are trying to grow their business that cannot get these same people who are going out, pulling people in and begging them to come. They can't get those people to come talk to them about expanding in Kansas. I talked to a guy this week who's trying to re-onshore stuff that he had to offshore during COVID. And he can't even get a return call from his government officials who are out there. They'll post all the time about how they're out there at this business in some other state or some other country, but they won't talk to the people here. We have incredible people here building businesses, and they're trying to grow those businesses. And in the meantime, they're fighting against all of these incentives that are coming for people from out of state. So I'm not saying we never talk to people from out of state, but what about the people here?
Right.
They've already made the commitment. They've already said they want to be here. When I started Cornerstone, there were other companies that were getting, for the same workforce I'm going after, they were getting tax credits that were worth $80,000 a job to come in here from another state. But I'm already here. Do you know what I could do with $80,000 a job? Do you know how fast I could have grown Cornerstone?
And scaled this thing,
and scaled it?
Yes.
But I didn't do that because I think a business the P&L should support the business anyway, not some taxpayer over here. Some mom who's trying to make ends meet shouldn't be trying to support my business. My business taxes should be supporting her ecosystem. So it's backwards.
It is backwards. And what I appreciate and what I hope we can do in these broader conversations as we head into a gubernatorial year is let's really frame these issues out and name the issues. And then let's talk creatively about strategies. I've said numerous times, particularly as a conservative in the pro-life movement, is we have got to extrapolate what this really means. And when I talk about being pro-life, I talk about not just babies in utero. I'm talking about what does it mean to have healthy families? What does it mean to contend for life? What does it mean to have a failing foster care system? What does it mean to have homelessness abounding the way it is? What's our creative strategies for these things? How can we take every policy and in the midst of every policy discussion, draw a connecting link to how does it impact healthier families? Can you help us with this conversation? Can you elevate this conversation?
Yeah, I think the idea of healthy families and what we need to do there is so big, but there's so much work to do and there's so much we could do, but we are failing miserably. I mean, you live in this world with DCF. And I've worked with numerous organizations and people who deal with DCF all the time. And we are re-traumatizing our kids over and over and over again when they go into that system. Yeah. And sometimes they're going in that system because their family's poor. Like, we need to think about that. Yeah. Is that really neglect? Or is it just they didn't get some things?
How can we be more preventative in these to keep kids from entering the system to begin with?
I heard a legislator say this, and I think it's true. The state makes a terrible parent.
Absolutely.
It's a terrible parent. A parent loves their child. I used to say this at the school district, like, those mama bears, when they show up, man, we should put our arms around them and do everything we can to try and help them because they care and they're advocating for their kids. We shouldn't be threatened by them. We shouldn't be upset by them. We should say, how do we help empower them? And maybe coach them along the way that they could say it a little differently, right? That's fine. We could do that. We can de-escalate the situation. We can have skills for that. But at the end of the day, they're there because they're upset about their kid and they're going to try and do whatever they can to make sure their kid has the right outcome. And dads are the same way, man. We're seeing more and more dads show up for their kids, which is amazing.
Can we contend for healthy families in this state? Let's contend for these families and healthy families and what it looks like. And every policy decision should have a connecting link somewhere, some way back to healthy families. Yeah,
and it shouldn't be trying to encourage families to break up in order to get some kind of government benefit. That is horrible. All of that comes from an attitude. And I saw this on the school board. I've seen it in the education community as a whole in the state of Kansas. There are a lot of people who have this savior complex, this hero complex. I know what's best for you. I know what's best for you and your family. Right. You should listen to me, and you should do the thing I'm telling you to do, and I will use whatever policy I can to make you do that. No, I don't need a savior. I already have one. And we don't need a hero to come save us. And the last couple times I watched movies like Superman and all, if you look at their downtown after the hero came, it was a mess.
Yes.
So I don't really want them showing up. I know what to do for my family, and you know what to do for your family, and so do all the listeners, and they should be empowered to do that.
So what do we need from our next governor then? Like, how do we empower families? How do we get a trajectory in this state that is healthier, a trajectory in this state to where people are coming here because the environment here promotes health. It promotes healthy families, healthy businesses, a healthy infrastructure. Like, what do we need in our next governor?
Yeah, I think we need someone who has not been stewarding the decline of Kansas, which frankly, all the other people running that I've looked at have been part of the problem. And on the other side, the Democrats' policies are terrible. We've seen people living out, when you read stories of what's happening to people when they've lived out these policies in place, and they're terrible outcomes. They're not good for people. They're not good for families. They're not good for our country. And so as we're ushering in this golden age, as President Trump called it at his beginning, at his inauguration, I think when you think about this golden age, we're going to miss it in Kansas if we don't get the right people in place. And so I think we need somebody who's outside and a fighter and thinks about things differently to come in and ask different questions, and who won't be stopped because they're afraid of hurting the feelings of the bureaucracy. Look, I'm not saying there aren't good people that work in these systems.
Sure, I know.
There are. And if you talk to them, they'll tell you this is a bureaucracy that I can't seem to fix. Okay, well then let's do something and fix it. Let's really fix it. But everyone else that, as I've talked and listened and walked around and looked at their records, they've all been stewarding this decline. So why would I put them in charge of turning it around?
Joy, another thing is when I saw you give that speech at the chamber luncheon, it was a visionary speech. It was about being a visionary leader, and you talked about things. And I remember you could hear a pin drop in that building. I mean, you had captured the entire audience. When you talk about the state, and we talk about issues, like, if I'm saying, Joy, you're a visionary leader, paint this vision. Like, what does it look like here in Kansas if Joy Eakins is the governor?
Yeah, so I think Kansas it has all this potential, right? And we should be the number one place in the country to have the American dream. And how do you measure that? I mean, I think there's a few ways to think about that. One is education. That's my own story, how I got out. How I built a better life is education. Yeah. So we've got to look at school choice. Powerful. We've got to look at empowering teachers. We've got to look at empowering parents to have the right to speak up for their child. We need to look at the tax and regulatory burden for business, because why can't businesses just grow here like crazy? Right. Why are they fighting? And for entrepreneurs to want to come here and create a business because it's such a great environment to do that.
Everything here, from the cost of living, all of it. Like, we should be the attraction nationally for people not to go to Tennessee, not to go to Texas, to come to Kansas to start your industry and your business.
Right. And then I think, the other piece of the American dream we talk about is owning your own home. And you think about the first time you owned your own home. I think about the first time I owned a home. I didn't grow up with our family owning homes. We rented. We moved around a lot. To own your own home, hang your pictures on the wall, and have an investment that you can pass down to the next generation. And we have a crisis with that.
We do. The easiest way in previous generations, our generation and before, to get into generational wealth was home ownership. It is virtually impossible for someone in their early, mid-20s, late 20s anymore to get into a home. Yeah. Interest rates, the valuation increases have made it unaffordable for home ownership for people that are getting out of college. And that is a significant challenge for this community. And we're not going to feel those pressures for a decade plus. So we got to have visionary leadership to help us in these capacities to unleash the market to meet these needs.
Yeah, so I think a lot of that is sitting down with the people in that market who live in Kansas and say, what's holding you back? What are the regulations that are holding you back? What are the cost drivers that are holding you back? What are the, we were talking to someone in rural Kansas the other day, and they said, our issue isn't affordable housing. We have plenty of that. We have almost too much. We need the kind of housing that draws in a workforce. So moderate to high end is what we need. That's where we're struggling.
That's dynamic. It's
going to be different. We're based on where you are in the state, and we have to be able to address those needs. Why is that an issue? How do we get ahead of it? And how do we help unleash people to do what they want to do? And that's not a government program. That's actually just the government getting out of the way so people can do what they need to do.
The government needs to lead that discussion.
They have
got to lead the discussion as to how we empower the people, the families, how we empower the teachers, how we empower the business leaders, how we empower the middle class in this state again. One of the things that we see a lot on the county side, and we talk a lot in the room, is the economic mobility. The economic mobility of people coming out of college that are degreed, that are entering the workforce, but the economic mobility of those in the middle class. It's more challenged, more complex. It's more difficult today than it ever has been in this state and in this country. And that's a challenge. That's a problem. That's a problem.
Yeah, it is a problem. And I think it's also a problem that we have this group of people before all of these career tech ed classes happened in high schools. So they're in their 20s to 50, and they have a job. They don't have a career, and they live in Kansas. And so how do we help them know that there's a path for them to have a career so they can get into home ownership, or they can make choices for their children's school?
It's good, Joy. It's good. You're a data person, so I'm going to bring this up. Let me preface this conversation by saying I think everyone, when we look at the federal level, we look at $36 trillion of debt. You look at the instability. You look at the ballooning deficits. Every single budget year, look at the process, look at all these things, and you hear about what the government spends its money on all across the globe while we have all these challenges here with the people that live in this country and in every state and every community. The discussion around DOGE is a hot topic, right? And I think most reasonable people say, yeah, the path we're on is not sustainable. That's not sustainable. And we need people with courage that are willing to fight and willing to go in there and really look at how we shake things up and right size and level set the federal government. You're a data person. This is what you do. What are your thoughts on DOGE and its impact and its potential? And is there something that can be mimicked here in Kansas?
So when's the last time you voted for a politician a president who actually went to the White House and actually tried to fix the problem?
Yeah.
Just think about it. I can't think of one. This is the first time. And, in his first term, President Trump, I think, tried to do it. And then he and his team, I think, realized that it was a bigger issue and there was bigger bureaucracy and a bigger pushback from people than they expected. So the second time around, they came ready to play. And, with DOGE, one of the things I told my data team, I said, I don't really care what your politics are, but what they're doing with data to figure out where money is being spent properly or improperly, or uncovering that there's 20 million Social Security numbers that belong to people over the age of 100. Come on. Just go learn about that as data people, because it's important what they're doing and looking at to determine what's happening. Because, so some people say, well, those 20 million people, take out fraud, they're just there and we clean that up and every time. Okay, but do you know the cost of cleaning up and maintaining 20 million Social Security numbers that should no longer be active and storing the data about that? There's a cost that goes with that too. So just identifying and cleaning it up, if there were no fraud, would save money. But of course there's fraud.
Sure.
They found fraud, and it helps them get on a path to clearing that fraud up. So, lots of props to President Trump for what he's doing in trying to get us back where we can sustain. Because we've seen other countries go down this road and continue and not have a correction. And then they find out and then they get in trouble. I think back to Europe several years ago and what happened there. We don't want that in America. That's not who we are. Yeah. So how do we get that under control? It takes some bold leadership to do that.
So there's a political element to it, and anything you talk about, particularly at the president level, there's going to be a lot of politics, but there's a practical element. I appreciate what you said was, when your team, let's look at data, let's look at the Doge efforts, and let's strip out politics, let's strip out, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on or from, let's actually look at what's trying to be accomplished. Right. And I appreciate that approach, because I think most reasonable people say it's not sustainable. We got to do something with reform. Is that possible at the state level?
We have to do it at the state level. And one of the things that to me is so frustrating is this last year they formed COGE. Okay, so an idea to try and do the same thing, and then immediately backed away from what they would be able to accomplish with it. For example, I mean, I've heard one of the senators repeatedly say, well, we don't have the kind of fraud they have in the U.S. government. How do you know that? Because during COVID, millions of dollars were stolen. Yeah. Millions of dollars were stolen. And every business owner I know got a notice that we had filed for unemployment for ourselves. So there's no fraud in the system. That just happened. By the way, on these people's watch, that just happened. They've all been there. They've all shepherded that system.
The numbers were wild. It was $400-600 million. It was a wild number. Yeah, it was
hundreds of millions of dollars gone. And who paid that back? Well, you and I did. Okay, maybe it came from federal money, but that's our money. That's, my left pocket instead of my right pocket. Sure. It's all our pockets. So when they start with, well, we don't know how much we can actually do, and then they go with, well, we don't really have that much fraud in Kansas. Well, are you sure? How do you know if you haven't even done the study yet? So, of course, I think we should look at what's going on in our different departments.
You would champion that.
And champion that, yeah. And using advanced data systems like they've done in Doge has been really smart. I mean, think about, there's just a few people doing that work, and what they've been able to uncover is incredible. It didn't take very long to do it. So there are a lot of great opportunities there, I think, for Kansas to make sure that we don't have any more fraud like that, to make sure we have systems in place that protect that data, and then to make sure that we have people who know how to maintain those systems so they don't get into a legacy status and this happens again.
Good. I knew you'd have an idea. Well, let me ask the golden question. Can you win? Like, the path to winning. This is running a statewide campaign as an outsider coming in, fighting establishment, name ID, advancing these creative ideas. You're a well-known entity here in Wichita, Kansas. Like, can you win? Like, I have an understanding of some of the players that are interested in coming in and throwing their name in the hat, and there's a lot of people that are interested in running to be our next governor. Can Joy Eakins win this race?
Absolutely. I wouldn't be thinking about it anymore if I couldn't. I mean, we started with data, and our data says that the field is wide open and nobody's excited about the same old people running again. It's particularly those who have ties to Brownback. Nobody is interested in going back to that era or rehashing that again. What we want to think about is what's for the future of Kansas. There's all this potential, and it's just under the surface, and who's going to unleash it, and who has a track record of that. And so when people hear my story, and the data says, when people hear my story and they hear what I do and what I bring to the table, they're very interested and excited about that. So my job is to build a team, which we've been doing, and I'm pretty excited about the team we've
heard a little bit about your team.
It's pretty exciting.
It's impressive.
Yeah, it's I'm serious about this. Yes. I'm not playing games, and this isn't Joy running for school board when she doesn't know what she's doing. This is Joy thinking, this is a real moment for Kansas. This is a real moment for us. Who are we going to be? Are we going to just continue to decline and go down and lose ourselves, or are we going to come out on top? And is this going to become the best place in America to live the American dream? I think we have everything we need to do that, but we need a leader who can have bold vision and courage and isn't afraid of hurting somebody's feelings, but will have civil debate and get us there. And that's me.
Yeah.
So, we put a team together. We've looked at strategy. We're looking at fundraising. We're doing all those things. And if we see that's happening, then we're going to declare and we're going to run and we're going to win and we're going to beat the Democrats.
There you go. Joy, there's one thing I've learned in knowing you is when you put your mind to something, special things happen. You have a capacity to bring people to the table and have the conversation and the discussion that is always hard is always easier when you're at the table because you think about things differently, you engage things differently. I am incredibly interested in how this is going to play out. If you decide to pull the trigger, there's a lot of people that are going to find interest in you being on that campaign trail. And I have a sense that you're going to enjoy the campaign trail. You like talking to people, you like knocking doors, you like doing events. And so if this is something you guys are going to do, I know that you're going to do it prayerfully, and I know you're going to do it with 100% of energy and investment. And when you're always in, and you're in a big way. So it'll be fun to watch.
Well, we're going to watch it together.
Okay. Joy, God bless you. Thank you so much for who you are, for who your family is. I'm excited to watch the state learn more about who you are and what makes you. And if it's in the cards, I think you'd be a great governor.
Thank you.
God bless you.